Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our first webinar of 2019, and first of many, perhaps, covering how you can prepare for the UK's exit from the EU, whenever that might happen, whatever form that might take. My name is William Barnes-Graham, and I am the Senior Content Editor at the Institute of Export and International Trade. Open to Export is a free online service helping small businesses get ready to sell overseas through our step-by-step articles and guides, regular webinars, our export action plan tool, and our quarterly competitions. You can find out about all of these on our website at opentoexport.com. Next slide, please. Yeah. Open to Export is powered by the Institute of Export and International Trade, the UK's professional membership body for traders, endorsed by the World Trade Organization and the International Chamber of Commerce as a small business champion. We offer a unique range of individual and business membership benefits, education and training catering for beginners through to master's degrees, and an always exciting and prestigious program of events celebrating UK businesses' exporting achievements. We will be running a live Q&A at the end of the session, and you can ask questions at any point during this webinar using the question box on the control panel to the right-hand side of your screen. Now, we've already had lots of questions sent in, so we will not be able to answer everything today. We are, however, looking to hold a Brexit Q&A next month, so if we don't get to your question today, look out for that, or you can contact the Institute's technical helpline, which I will post a link to in the follow-up messaging from this webinar. So tackling the question on everyone's lips today, we have Richard Bartlett from the Institute of Export and International Trade and Claire Taylor from Simply VAT. Richard is the Director of Business Development at the Institute and leads on much of the Institute's Brexit-related training courses, including our post-Brexit planning workshops and our Brexit health check offerings. Claire is the CEO of Simply VAT, provide a wide range of international VAT services, and also members of the Institute of Export. But without any further ado, I'd like to hand over to Richard.
Oh, thank you, Will, and thank you for that introduction. Welcome, everybody. Yes, my name's Richard, and I'm going to try and go through very clearly the things we should be looking out for when we're looking at maybe a hard or a transition period. Like Will said, I've been doing many of these courses, workshops. I've been doing in-house training, and since about July, I've kind of lived and breathed Brexit, and I do hear a lot of things out there from politicians and etc., and really very confusing. So what I want to try and do today is just give you a clear path of what you should be looking out for, what you maybe should be planning for, and really what might happen in the two scenarios. And I've done a list here. We can just go to the page. Yeah, so I'll just go through because I want to try and be very black and white. So it's just, I'm finding when I'm doing these particular workshops or with customers, it's a general concern on certain topics and really confusion of what's being said and what actually needs to be done. And I'll go through the transition period at the end because I put it on my last slide. So I just wanted to give you a better understanding of how the no Brexit deal might work and what you really need to start preparing for. And you know, you're not on your own. We're all concerned. I run a business, Claire runs a business, and we're all facing the same dilemma. What's happening? And obviously after last night's votes, obviously we're no further ado. But what I will say is that we do need to prepare, whether it's a hard or soft. We're going to go into a documentation world, and we just need to get ourselves prepared. If we can do it now and get ourselves ready in the worst case scenario, at least we can be prepared for the best eventuality, what might happen. And again, I'll go through the transport, logistics and everything else just to kind of give you a bit of ease, because there's a lot of scaremongering and everything else going out there. And I've got a logistics background of over 20 years, and I know the logistics are working very hard on this. First of all, we'll just go through the customs and things that really you need to be looking out for. Obviously, in the event of a no deal, there's already talk about customs, export declaration, duties, commodities. And if you're not exporting to outside the EU, you won't be used to this format. We're so used to exporting goods from Manchester to Barcelona, having no documentation, just a packing list, everything goes through and everything's fine. And obviously, if you're not used to dealing outside into the WTO kind of agreements outside in the world, which the EU have agreements with, you won't be used to the documentation. So if you're in that position, and also if you're already in the position of exporting already outside the EU, it's just to get yourself prepared, because you won't be used to doing so much documentation going forward. What I would say is that when you're exporting on a no deal scenario, and if this happening the 1st of April, which I'd like to hope it doesn't. But if it does, these are the things we need to start looking at as a business. On the export side, you'll be required to do your booking as normal, you'll do your Incoterms, you'll ship it as normal. But what will happen now is you'll have to do an export declaration. And on an export declaration, I know there's been a few questions on this. I'll just run, if you're not used to doing this, it's a form that you have to fill in. And basically you need a URI number. Now a URI number is, a lot of people have it, but if you're not dealt outside the EU, you won't have this, but you can apply to Hmrc, and you need this for when you're exporting now if we're going to a no deal. And it'd be also worth doing anyway if you haven't got it and it's going to be a transition. I'll still get yourself prepared for that. It's going to be a lot more documentation required and a lot of pressure now on your supply chain. And I'll just go through quickly on the export declaration because I know it's a concern and certainly a lot of questions that have been asked on this. An export declaration is really just a form that you're going to have to fill out for when it gets to port and when it can be released, obviously from Dover or the Channel Tunnel or whichever ports which are being actually announced at the moment. And you'll have to put your shipping details and your URI number. You need to have your consignee details on there, your weights, your dimensions, your CPC, which is if it's a permanent export, a temporary, or it's a return. Your commodity code needs to be put on there. Your origins might need to be put on there as well. Obviously, the value of the goods. So there's lots of things you need to think about putting on there. And now start checking. What I would say is, particularly on your commodity codes, this is a real big issue at the moment. I'm finding when I'm visiting lots of clients, is they're so used to using a freight forwarder who will do that for you, but they use the general commodity codes because there's been no real need for when we're exporting into the EU. So again, start looking at your commodity codes. Obviously, this will have a tariff. So when you export, what will happen is that you will move the goods down to Dover. Dover will check your documents, make sure it's correct. It'll be then shipped, say we're going to, let's for instance, say we're going to Germany. Once they arrive in Germany, they'll need to be checked, etc. And then they will have to pay the duty and the VAT on that on the other side, so until it's released. So there's a process. So you've got the process here, filling all your documentation, and you've got to make sure that documentation is correct. Again, Institute can help you, Chambers, there's lots of organising. Your local freight forwarder should be able to help you on this because it's a much concern for them because they're going to be declaring it for you. The commodity codes is an 8 to a 10 digit. So again, start looking at your products and start looking at your commodity, and also maybe have a look at your origin, because your origin might play a big part if we're outside in a no deal scenario and you're dealing with the third world and we have certain agreements with just the UK. I'm sure people are aware at the moment that your origin at the moment within the EU is classed the same. So if you're importing goods from in the EU and you're also combining it in the UK, the last person to export it who has the control is classed as the origin. But obviously you're going to lose that control because you won't be able to use the EU side of that side. So obviously you'll only have the UK, and you've got to make sure that you have that 60 plus. But again, I'll go over that in a bit more detail, just to give you an understanding. So it will ship to Dover, they'll clear it, off it goes to Germany. He will clear it on his side. And again, depending on your Incoterms, you're going to have to start thinking about who's going to be paying the duties on the other side. Obviously, your customer's not going to be happy, but somebody's going to have to pay it. So again, your Incoterms can play a part in that, and I'll briefly go through that in a minute when I go down my slide. Another thing to consider is the VAT side, but Claire, our expertise on that, will go on that after my talk. I don't want to go too much into the VAT because Claire's very knowledgeable on that. So on your imports, exactly the same. If you're so used to importing from around the world, you'll be used to doing your import declaration, you used to be clearing your goods, wait for it, and then it can be released and sent to you. So there's all possible delays. So all I would say is start planning yourself that if there is going to be delays on a no Brexit, these are the things you've got to think about on top of everything else that we're all concerned about, and also the extra paperwork that's going to be implemented to you. Obviously, if you just, like I've said, you've got the URI number there, I'll put it on there just so you know that you need to look at that. And just make sure you're prepared and understand what documents are required. And again, speak to your local freight forwarder, they'll be able to help you. And consider if obviously you haven't got the right paperwork, it could be a big problem. It could delay your goods leaving the UK in the first place, even though we've got added problems. You need to make sure that paperwork. So again, we're going into a much more paperwork society. We're going into a hard Brexit, and it's things that we've never had to prepare for before, but we're having to do now. I've actually put on here about Incoterms because there's a lot of risk involved with Incoterms. So it's understanding how Incoterms work, and obviously there's lots of training going on, and the institute do a lot of training on Incoterms. So at the moment, if you're selling on an ex-works basis on your exports, obviously once your buyer decides to buy it from you, you'll still need to do paperwork, but your responsibility, and once it's picked up from yours, is gone, and the responsibility is then with your customer. If there's delays, obviously it's within his problem, because obviously you're selling an ex-works, and a lot of people sell an FCA. If you're selling on a freight paid right through, obviously the pressure's on you to make sure you get it through there. And if you decide that you want to pay for the duties, you can do that. Again, talk to your forwarder. They can collect the duties on your behalf, but the VAT will be paid in the nominated country. That otherwise you won't be able to pay the VAT for them, because that needs to be done there. But again, Claire will explain more to that. And in terms of some charts, and again, if we get more questions going forward, we can kind of let people understand how Incoterms work. And I've got some charts which I can send through. Origin's another thing to consider. It's a real big concern in the UK, particularly the car industry, in the automotive side. You know, we're in a world, and I'm sure you're the same, and a lot of my customers that I deal with, because I've got my own business, are so used to bringing the goods in from China, from Europe, obviously putting bits and bats on it, and then exporting it back out, and not really having to worry about the origin, particularly when it's going into the EU, because we have that agreement. Obviously, that's going to change, so you're going to have to start looking at your origin to see what your origin is, and also start talking to if you're buying a lot from the UK, one thing I would advise you to do is actually talk to your suppliers in the UK and find out where their origin is, because we're coming across this quite a lot where, yeah, I buy everything from the UK, I'm okay, but actually when they check with their suppliers in the UK, some of the goods are actually not origin of the UK, their origin from where they've imported it from. So you just got to be careful that your origin, how it works. But again, there's plenty of advice on origin, and I don't want to kind of frighten you with a lot on the origin, but it's something that your business probably needs to come, to think about the planning. So I can run the next page, please. Okay. So that's customs and all your different things. So the things we've got to think about on customs, obviously, is going to be a lot more paper. Who does it? Do you use your local chamber? Do you use your local freight forwarder? Are you confident your freight forwarder can do it for you? You know, these are the things you've got to think about. And I know, obviously, you've got local chambers that will help you. You can go through the institute. There's other organisations. But again, it's a concern in who's going to do it on the customs. Obviously, you've got to make sure you've got all the paper. So when you're doing your invoice, what we're saying to people, or what I'm recommending in-house when I'm going to business, is actually try and now get into a position where you put all the details on your invoice anyway. So you've got commodity codes, your origins, everything's already on there. So we do suddenly fall into a hard Brexit, and we go on the 1st or 11 o'clock on March, the end of March, and we go suddenly into a hard Brexit. We can only be prepared as best we can, and this is the best way we can prepare. If we can prepare everything that we need to do on the customs side, hopefully the logistics can do their bit. And I'm just going to go through the logistics, because there's so much talk about logistics at the moment and what's happening, and I feel a lot of kind of frightening thoughts out there that you're going to be delayed and nothing's going to move. And I'll just kind of give you an idea, because my background's on the logistics. Just give you an idea, there's around 10,000 vehicles going in and out from the EU to the UK. So there's a lot of vehicles, 10,000 coming in and out. And at the moment, probably about 1% get checked. So they get checked for all different variety of reasons. But obviously, at the moment, because we've got no customs or anything, they don't need to be checked unless they're coming in from places like Switzerland and other places which are kind of EU. And we have to do the EUR documents when we're exporting. So there's a few little checks, but nothing to the extent that will happen. And just give you an idea, when we did our figures, there's about 54 million documentations at the moment done. In the face of no Brexit, that'll go to about 265 million within a year. So you can see the vast amount of paperwork that's going to be involved. So you can imagine that the reason they're looking at ports, etc., and other areas to look at, how they can ease the pressure off Dover and the tunnel. But what I would say, yes, there will be delays. I'm absolutely certain there will be delays, but I think it's short term. I think there will be a short term until we find a system, but I can't imagine and this is a personal thing, and this is what I said to probably the 200 businesses I've visited in the last, I don't know, 6 months, is they will find a way of moving them goods in and out, without doubt. You know, yes, we'll have a few ups and downs, and you have to be prepared for that, but this will not last forever. This will last, for me, a short period of time, within a few weeks, until, and hopefully the government in that process. And I still hope we'll get a transition, even if we go probably into a hard Brexit. I would like to hope there's some transition period there. Obviously, each vehicle at the moment, they're saying, have to be checked, because we don't have an electronic system like they do in some other European countries. So we have that problem where everything has to be done manually and then passed and then checked. So again, there could be delays there, but again, we're going to try and erase that. You know, the freight forwarders have been working very hard in the last year to try and get themselves prepared. And I honestly think that a lot of the freight forwarders are pretty well prepared now, and they want to be exporting your goods, they want to be shipping. So again, a lot of horror stories, but don't get too wrapped up in this. There will be a way of moving goods, and it's particularly in our interest and in the user interest. We currently do around 47% each, our exports to the EU, 47 back. Last in September, our exports went up by 1 billion, so we're not seeing a short-term problem because of Brexit. But on our imports coming in from the EU, we saw a shortfall of 5 billion. So you can see there's a bit of a change there, but our exports are still growing. So that's the thing to think about, that if your customer's still working with you now, they're going to be working with you tomorrow. There's just going to be a few hiccups, and you've just got to decide who's going to be paying the different cost. And also to consider, and one thing that nobody ever thinks about, is every vehicle that comes into the UK or goes out the UK, and I'm absolutely certain when you arrive at your factory and your warehouse, probably around 98% of Eastern European or EU hauliers. So again, we've got a major problem that if we go into a hard Brexit, how is that going to affect our stream of foreign hauliers coming into the UK and obviously leaving? So again, it's a big concern in Europe, and it's a concern here, and it's just something to consider, that there could be delays there. But again, I think if we can get a smooth transition, I think we should be okay. I would say as a personal, build a relationship up with your forwarder. It's very clear that you need to start talking to them. Talk to them about costs. You know, the one thing you don't want is them to work on a hard Brexit and there's going to be extra costs. Yes, you're going to have extra costs somewhere, because obviously there's going to be documentations, etc. But particularly with a forwarder, you don't want to be hit with big increases. So again, it's building a relationship with them, because they want to work with you. That's what I'm certainly finding when I've been doing forums with freight forwarders. They want to work with a customer. They want to work with you. And that's very important. And again, I would say start your negotiations. If there's going to be an increase, is it better to know now? Is it better to speak to your customer in Europe if there's going to be an increase? And also, if you're importing, also consider the other terms. Are you going to pay the duty? Is your supplier in the EU going to help you with the duties paid? If there's going to be extra cost, are you going to minimise that cost to you? Are you going to try and share it? So again, it's just talking to your supplier or your customer. It's one thing I would recommend you to really do. So we've got the next slide, please. I'm sorry, I'm going on a bit. I'm used to talking for 3 or 4 hours, so I'll try and be quick. Again, I'm just saying with planning, it's very important. Your documentation. If you're stuck with your documentation, there's plenty of people. We're doing training. There's lots of other training out there. There's some good websites out there. There's people there to help you. So, I know the government have left this right to the kind of last minute because they're not quite sure what's going to happen. But there's help there. We're running some courses, and speak to us. I'm sure we can help you. We know there's going to be possible delays, so maybe just plan yourself a little bit better. Plan your goods coming in a bit earlier. Plan your exports going out. Talk to your customer, talk to each other, and just find out where the risk is. If they're saying you can't be delayed more than 2 days on an export, well, then maybe you need to plan the export going out a little bit early just in case there is a hard Brexit. And also for your imports, talk to your customers. Think about who's the Incoterms. I would really start looking at that, because it's something we've never really had to work on in the EU, because we're noticing now a lot of customers are wanting the Incoterms change and putting the pressure on the UK supplier. So you just be careful there, and just, if you work on Xworks now, try and keep it to Xworks, or if you want to change them terms, it's up to you. But there are, the Incoterms are quite easy to work out. There's some nice websites out there. You can go on Google and you can print out the Incoterms. And again, if you get stuck with that, you can speak to us. We can certainly go through that with you. Bear in mind, Incoterms are changing in 2020. It's a 10-year Yes, it's 2010, 2020, so there'll be training, new Incoterms, another thing to a headache. You know, your cost, who's going to absorb the cost? Speak to imports experts to ease that pressure. And like I say, any questions going forward, please ask on our webinar today. I'm sorry that I tried to fit in a lot, and I'm used to talking a lot longer. But if there's any concerns, but please, there's no reason to panic. You know, as long as we put everything in place, as an exporter or an importer, that's all we can do. We know that freight forwarders are in the same position as everybody wants it to work. So again, there's nothing we can do, whether it's a no deal or transition. But can we just go to the next page? Can I just quickly go through? If there's a transition period, just so you're clear on this, and you hear a lot about it, if there is a transition period, nothing changes until the end of that period. And we know the EU was pushing for that transition period till the end of 2021, and for a very good reason. And Hmrc, I think, are in the same position as well. If you have a transition period to 2021, we will be in a situation where we can get everything prepared. So it's not saying you forget about your document. You're going to have to do that, but you'll have a bit of time to get yourself prepared. And also, I'm hoping that by that time, all the ports will be electronic, so you won't have these delays with paperwork. So I think a transition could be a really good opportunity for us. And I do hope, even if we don't get a deal with a transition, we get a no deal, we'll still get a transition period. That's what I'm hoping. Next slide, please. You know, just to give you an idea of what's happening with the Institute, I'm doing post-Brexit workshops. We do these in teams all around the UK, Scotland, everywhere, and they really are good, and they really get companies talking in the workshops where they are. Companies are in different positions and they can help each other. Or we can come to your business and do a health check. Just recently, I've done 10 in the last probably 3 weeks, and you know, helping from business of $500 million down to business only doing 200,000-300,000. So we're there to help any kind of business. We're here to help you. There's grants. Have a look on the websites. There's plenty of grants out there. Please use them. You know, use the grants to do the training because of the AO. I haven't talked about AO because obviously it's quite a long process, but you hear a lot about AO, and AO is a system that Hmrc are trying to push for your imports coming in. That obviously that you can clear it when it comes to you because you're AO accredited. You get a lot of freight on AO. We have now an expertise lady there, Helen, who can help you with that. So if anybody's got any questions on there, and we're also doing a training day, so just to get you, if you think it's something you need, because I know the government are really pushing for this. You know, for me, I haven't pushed it today because I haven't got it, you know, we have a short period of time. But if anybody's got any questions on AO here, I can certainly answer them for you. And after that, can I pass you over to Claire, please, on Simple VAT? We'll go through more on the VAT side of the business, and it's worth listening to because it's very knowledgeable information. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. If you can, yeah. So my name is Claire Taylor from simplyvat.com, and simplyvat.com provides international VAT solutions to businesses trading cross-border. Given the vote of no confidence last night on the May deal, there's obviously a massive amount of uncertainty around what will happen next. But the only thing that we do know in the world of international VAT is the government's viewpoint on a no deal, as technical notices on the application of VAT regulations in the case of a no deal were published towards the end of last year. So I'm going to talk you through the content of those technical notices as high level as I can, which detail the processes that you're going to need to understand and follow should we leave the European Union completely. Next slide, please. So I'm going to look at 3 questions, key questions that we get asked, shown here. So in which situation should VAT be collected at the border after Brexit? Will there be a change in the VAT rate or the potential for it to be scrapped altogether in the UK after Brexit? And how can businesses prepare for potential tax changes if trading goods cross-border? Again, just want to reiterate, the information I'm giving you is based on a no-deal Brexit, where the UK will be considered as a non-EU country. And just so you can pace yourselves during my presentation, I've got about 17 slides to go through, but hopefully it won't be too technical for you. I'll try to keep it palatable, if you like. Okay, so first question, in which situation could VAT be collected at the border after Brexit? So to set the scene as it is now, the EU single market has meant there's been very little barriers to trade. As Richard was saying, no tariffs, quotas, taxes on trade within the EU, and very little paperwork. And we've had the luxury of free movement of goods and services and people. Membership of the EU also removed non-tariff barriers like regulations on safety products, amongst others. And this is why there are EU-wide regulations covering a whole host of industries and products, everything from food standards and the use of chemicals to working hours and health and safety. So the EU, for all its warts, was very much an attempt to create a level playing field and a single trading market. So the no-deal scenario would mean that we leave the EU on the 29th of March, and I'm not sure about a transition period. I just don't know how this is going to unfold. The 29th of March is a handful of days away, and potentially there could be no transition period. So what does this mean? What has the government said in their technical notice? So firstly, we're going to look at the UK and companies importing into the UK. So to start with, the government has confirmed that there will be a UK VAT system. The UK Treasury gained too much revenue from it, and VAT accounted for more than £1 billion of UK government income last year, and it would be too costly to replace, so it's definitely here to stay. The VAT rules relating to UK domestic transactions are going to continue to apply as we know them now to businesses and consumers. However, without a deal, there's going to be specific changes to the VAT rules that apply between the UK and EU, obviously. So the first big bit of news is that Hmrc are going to introduce postponed accounting for UK VAT registered businesses on any imports coming into the UK. And this is going to replace paying import VAT at the time of import or soon after. And this rule is going to apply to imports from both EU and non-EU countries. Customs declarations and payment of duties will still be required. But in terms of the VAT, the details on accounting and record keeping requirements will be issued, apparently in due course. Haven't seen anything yet. The government's obviously thinking this through. These measures have been introduced to mitigate the adverse cash flow impacts that would happen if the import rules were left unchanged. And the government is also trying to ensure a continued level playing field in a no-deal scenario. The other new policy, which is much more in line with global thinking rather than to do with Brexit, but is aligned with it, is that the low-value consignment relief will be scrapped, and for parcels up to the value of £135, VAT will be collected on a technology-based solution, which will require registration. The government say they're going to launch this round about now, prior to the 29th of March, but again, no sign of it yet, but maybe someone can inform me otherwise. Any parcels over the value of £135 will be covered by any standard rules. So next slide, please. So now I'm going to look at importing into the EU from the UK, and we're going to look at both the VAT treatments in terms of goods and services to both businesses and private consumers. Thank you. So we'll start looking at what is in place now, again, for business-to-business transactions. So at the moment, if you're a business trading with another VAT-registered business in the EU, you as the supplier have no obligation to VAT register in that country of supply, as the supply is classed as what's known in intra-community exempt supply, and it's accounted for by the customer under a reverse charge mechanism. So other reporting requirements to adhere to EU legislation includes things like the B2c Sales list and Intrastat declarations, which you're probably familiar with. In the EU, they also worked on other simplification methods to reduce the burden on businesses of VAT, such as triangulation, which is where 3 parties in 3 different EU countries. The use of triangulation negates the need for the supplier to have multiple VAT registrations. So after Brexit, you're no longer going to need to complete the B2c Sales lists or Intrastat reports if they become relevant. but you will still be required to complete a customs declaration. VAT registered UK businesses supplying goods to EU businesses, that supply of goods is now going to be classed as an export and can be zero rated, but you will need to retain evidence to prove that goods left the UK to support the zero rated supply. However, import payments will be due at the EU border of the country, the first port of entry, when importing the goods into the EU. Government advice on the technical notice is for business to research their own supply chains, look at their own resources, to check the relevant import VAT rules in the EU member state concerned. They also stated that you may want to speak to specialist freight forwarders, customs agents have an awful lot of knowledge, although they do admit that this advice in the technical notice comes obviously at an extra cost when you talk to these additional suppliers. Next slide, please. Oh no, stay on that one, sorry. You're ahead of me. So now we're moving on to B2c sales, so to private consumers. And currently these are governed by the EU VAT distance selling rules, and they state that you charge local VAT on any sales until you hit set thresholds in those EU countries. At this point, you're going to have to register in that country. For example, in France, if your sales exceeded the French threshold of 35,000 euros. Another area that really affects the B2C sales, especially those of you who are using Amazon's fulfillment center infrastructure across Europe, is when a company, whether it be EU or non-EU, has stock in an EU country for onward sale to private consumers. Now, this triggers an immediate need to VAT register. There is no threshold to exceed. Next slide, please. So post-Brexit, UK businesses will be exporting goods to EU private consumers. The distance selling rules will no longer apply, so you won't need to monitor them. UK businesses will zero rate their sales of goods to EU customers as per exports to non-EU customers now. So goods entering the EU will enter the same way as if they were entering from a different non-EU country. Associated import VAT, customs duties going to be due when the goods arrive into the EU. If a UK business stores goods in an EU country, again, it's going to require a VAT registration because you need to have a registration where sales, where stock is supplying sales to private consumers. So once stock is there, though, you can leverage the EU distance selling rules. So your stock's in a country in Europe, even though the UK has left the EU. And the use of the distance selling rules, once your stock is in a European country, this means you won't only have to register in additional countries when you exceed their distance selling thresholds. Another potential difference is fiscal representation may be required because some countries like France, Poland, Italy require a fiscal representative to be in place with any non-EU company, which the UK company will be post-Brexit. So a fiscal rep is jointly and severally liable for any VAT owed, so you may have to put a bank guarantee in place, and additional costs and resources will be added to your supply chain setup. Next slide, please. So UK businesses supplying to other businesses, if they're supplying services to other businesses in the EU. Currently, if you are a supplier of services to EU customers, the reverse charge mechanism does apply. And this means no VAT appears on the invoice, but your invoice, the supplier's invoice must meet VAT compliance criteria, such as getting your custom valid VAT number. This must be placed on the invoice along with obligatory phrase stating that the customer is going to account for the VAT. You also must submit an EC sales list for services. And if you're the customer, you must provide a valid VAT number to your supplier for your supplier to be able to apply the reverse charge. Next slide, please. So post-Brexit, you won't have to obtain a valid VAT number and the transaction won't be recorded under the EU VAT reverse charge mechanisms, and you also won't have to file EC sales list. However, the customer would still count for the VAT and VAT won't be charged. And if you're the customer, don't supply your VAT number, again, no VAT will be charged in the invoice. It's kind of classed as an export, if you like, for services. Next slide, please. So we're looking now at digital services supplied to private consumers. Now, currently, UK businesses are covered by the VAT-MOS mini one-stop shop rules, whereby VAT on digital services is charged where the customer is resident. Currently, UK businesses selling digital services file their VAT-MOS declarations through the Hmrc portal. Post a no-deal Brexit, these supplies will come under the non-union VAT-MOS rules, and UK businesses will no longer be able to file via Hmrc. A UK company will have to register in a EU country of their choice and file via that country, but you can only arrange this after the UK leaves the EU. Or an alternative, you can VAT register in each UK country where you make the sale, which isn't usually viable considering the cost of compliance. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to move on to the second question. Will there be a change in the VAT rate or the potential for it to be scrapped altogether? Now, as stated previously, the UK government is not going to scrap the VAT system in the UK, and this has been announced in the technical notice. So local, domestic UK transactions will continue. VAT rules will continue to apply to businesses as they do now. With a no-deal situation, I've just talked you through the kind of differences when trading with Europe. In terms of VAT rates here in the UK, the differences we may experience, the UK will now have the ability and authority to apply its own VAT rates to different product categories. We used to have to go to Brussels if we wanted any changes until now, but this won't be relevant. We won't need to go to Brussels to get their approval. In terms of a change of the standard VAT rate in the UK at 20%, we don't think this is going to be reduced anytime soon. I may be wrong, but we think that the Treasury is going to need to maintain cash flow, and it's not an area that they're going to look to reduce because they've got too much to gain from it. Next slide, please. So last night, May's Brexit deal was voted unanimously down, as I'm sure we all know, and it was voted down across all the political divides with a majority of 230, I think. So what's the timetable now? What happens next? Firstly, tonight, we're going to see a vote of no confidence being held, a vote of no confidence in the government being held. The word on the street, if you like, is this probably won't be carried through, as Theresa May is still a more attractive proposition than Corbyn to the very slim Conservative and DUP majority in Parliament. So it looks like May will still be in charge of negotiations going forward. What we do know for certain after yesterday is that Parliament doesn't like the current deal on the table, but what actually do they like? Which deal is going to satisfy the wants of each kind of warring faction? The divisions in opinion are deep and quite frankly kind of held stubbornly throughout the country, with each side obviously thinking that it knows best, and of course this is reflected with divisions in Parliament. There's still a very real possibility that the UK is going to leave on the 29th of March, potentially with no transition period. So how do you prepare for this as the exporter? I think politicians really underestimate how hard businesses have to work to create viable and seamless supply chains. And a time like this of unprecedented uncertainty has a huge impact on your available resources, obviously much more in the small to medium-sized businesses. So, you know, what's the best you can do? And I think Richard touched a lot on this. Next slide, please. So just really to reinforce, and again, the government's technical notice, they've really tried to lay out practical steps that you will have to take as a non-EU importer. And again, try and put some of these in place, whether you end up using them or not. It just seems to be the best plan at the moment. Just to reiterate, UK businesses are going to have to register for an EORI number, and the Hmrc have actually launched a website, and the address is there on this slide to allow you to apply for your EORI number. HMRC also advise you to speak to a freight forwarder, customer agent, experts who can help you with the new custom paperwork. And also, Richard was saying the Institute of Export has some really good courses and government grants that can help support this and help you understand additional requirements that you may have to fulfill. Check your contracts with your suppliers and customers. Again, look at the Incoterms. Do they reflect that you are potentially classed as an importer now? What needs to happen to get them changed? Do you know the rules and regulations of the EU country to which you're importing? And how is this going to impact on your resources? You really, I think a lot of you have probably thought this already, but how much volume are you doing in the EU? Do the changes coming still make the EU an attractive and profitable market for your business? And if you do want to continue, do you need additional funding to cover the cost of the new supply chain setups? And where would you get this money from? Next slide, please. Richard and William covered what the Institute of Export can offer you, and there's some great resources there. I also want to mention the British Chamber of Commerce. They do have the ear of the government. I don't know how much use it is to influence government policy. They're there for monthly meetings, apparently, and they're trying to represent UK business and trying to get some purchase really on what the government is planning. They've got some good collateral on their website. There's a Brexit checklist, which includes some of the questions that I've got on the slide here, what you need to think about, what you need to get in place for the continued survival of your business post-Brexit. And next slide, please. The government also have some support emails, which lets you know information as and when, developments as and when they happen, so you can sign up for that as well. So that's really what I've got to say, and thank you. If you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch. And back.
Great, thank you, Claire, and Richard as well, for outlining some of the myriad challenges that we're all facing over the next few months in whatever situation does end up prevailing. We're going to do a quick straw poll quickly, just to gauge how optimistic everyone's feeling about exporting in light of yesterday's votes. I'm just going to pop that on the screen now. I'll give that a few minutes for you to vote. So on a scale of 1 to 5, how optimistic are you about exporting following last night's vote, where 5 is very optimistic? So I'll let that run for a few more seconds. While I'm letting that run, Claire, we had a question just to clarify one point. A couple of people asked, what is postponed accounting and when can you do it for, if that makes sense? So can you quickly clarify a bit on postponed accounting, please?
The postponed accounting that's potentially going to come in, we don't know too much information. It just means now if you import goods into the UK, usually import VAT is charged, which can be refunded on your VAT return, but there's obviously a time delay with that, and it can impact cash flow. So in terms of the postponed accounting, the government are looking at really pulling it back, so there is no impact on cash flow because we've left the EU. But again, the actual detail to how they're going to implement it hasn't been forthcoming as yet, but we'll make sure that we publish that and get that to the audience as soon as things happen. I think, if I'm honest, Theresa May looked like they were really hopeful to get the deal through. So in terms of planning, government planning and the resources that they're providing, they're a bit slow in getting things actually to fruition for people to use. But it is one of the implementations that they're sure of, obviously, just to try and keep a level playing field for UK businesses.
Great, thank you. That's really useful. And yeah, if there's any other questions on that side of things, then we can follow that up afterwards. I'm just going to share the results now of the poll, which is actually quite interesting. So it's neither here nor there in terms of optimism or a lack of it. It's sort of middling. So I guess that's a reflection of people just not really knowing yet how to feel about Brexit, because we still don't know what it is yet. So that's pretty interesting, I think. I just invite Richard, do you have any thoughts on that, and especially in terms of kind of what people can do to prepare for the unknown? Kind of how can people prepare for this unknown situation? And what do you think of that poll finding?
Oh, hi, yeah. The poll, actually, I was quite surprised, actually, on the 3 to 5, how high it was. I'm certainly, of the 220 businesses I've done Brexit workshops with, I would say that the optimism is high. The confusion, the kind of frustration is what's stopping people. We know investment from, if you're owned by companies around the world, there's a bit of not much investment coming back in because they're not sure what's going to happen with Brexit. I truly believe there's a great opportunity out there come no Brexit or a hard deal or whatever it is. I still think that in the WTO there'll be some good opportunities, and I still think there's, our businesses. I've not come across many businesses that are actually downsizing in business. Their exports are good. They've got good order books. It's just unfortunate we've got this. We just hope the government can get something, or Parliament can get something in place so we can actually properly plan. If we plan everything we've done on this course today, and thank you, Claire, for clarifying some of the things on VAT, we should be okay. All this scaremongering, I think we're a robust country, and I think, let's be positive. Yeah, there's nothing we could do. Parliament, politicians think what they think, but what we can do is prepare. And if we're not losing customers now, there's no reason why you're not going to expand on what you're doing at the moment into the EU and around the world as well.
Great, a nice positive. To get us into the Q&A, just a reminder that you can ask questions using the question panel on the right-hand side of the screen. We won't get to all of these today, but we'll do what we can. Just a couple questions around EORI or YORI. How long does it take to apply for one, and is there a cost to getting one, Richard?
No, as far as I know, there's if you apply to Hmrc, I believe it takes a couple of weeks. It's not a long process, and I don't believe there's any cost. It's just that you need this to do your exports, and it's just an added thing that you'll need going forward. So yeah, it doesn't take long. Hmrc are pushing it, so I think if you'll go on the websites, they've actually updated the website in the last 4 or 5 weeks, and it seems to be it can be quite complex, Hmrc, but just bear with it, put your details in the UI and you should get the forms. I don't think, I'll have a look at that, but I'm sure there's, you shouldn't, I can't imagine there's any cost there. But again, it's there, it's all nice and easy to apply for, and I believe it takes between 1 and 2 weeks.
Can I just jump in there as well? If you've got a UK VAT number, get the EORI number aligned to the VAT number, and you can request this from Hmrc. And then the numbers are almost identical, bar an EORI number has 3 additional zeros on the end. But it's something that you want to do to kind of make, identify the VAT element. But that's probably the easiest way to get it. But it can take a couple of weeks.
Great, thank you both. And another question for Richard. It was just, there's a lot of talk around ports and kind of ship freighting, but what thoughts do you have around air freight? Is there anything that companies should be doing who exports by air should be preparing for?
Yeah, I think one thing I've noticed with the air freight, because we've been doing some forums, is the actual air freight, some of the big companies are really preparing for Brexit. They're going to see a big pressure on them in the next few months, that maybe a lot of companies will come to them with the express deliveries, obviously, because they don't want to have the problems of the delays at ports. So they're getting pretty well prepared. And I think UPS have just opened a fantastic facility down in East Midlands, so there's a lot of investment going in. The only thing I would say with air freight, just to bear in mind that people who normally air freighting into Europe over many years, is they don't necessarily air freight it, they sometimes trunk it. The truncate, another thing to consider when you see all these figures being thrown around, just be conscious that a lot of the air freight businesses in America and around the world actually ship into Europe and then trunk it over into the UK because it's a cheaper way and a faster way of doing a service. So again, figures are a bit distorted when politicians are telling you that it's a massive divide in business. It's actually very equal. But yeah, the air freight side is there. Speed some, they're very well prepared. Everything's electronic. We know a lot of the air freight. I did a talk with a company called Expeditors. They're really well prepared for Brexit on the air freight. So again, it's an option there, but it's a lot more expensive. So just be careful, just make sure you can afford that cost before you jump into it. And again, just see what happens. Don't just jump into air freight. I'm pretty sure that the ports will be there to help, and they'll want a smooth transition as quick as possible.
Great, thank you, Richard. A couple VAT questions for Claire. So firstly, can Amazon collect VAT on your behalf as a business? And can you use UK VAT in all EU markets if your sales are low? Claire.
Okay. Amazon don't collect the VAT at the moment for sellers. Very much the seller is responsible for their VAT obligations on any sales made via Amazon. At the moment, you can use your UK VAT number and leverage the distance selling rules, which I stated in the presentation. But after we leave the EU, there's a couple of things you could do. One, you could get the customer to account for any import charges and VAT from within the EU. A lot of businesses don't do this. It isn't always the best customer experience. And if you do it, make it really obvious that those will be additional charges, so that they don't get any unwarranted surprises. Or you could, as I said in the presentation, use a fulfillment centre based within the EU. And from here, you can service other private customers within the EU via the distance selling rules. So you have a set threshold. In Germany, Netherlands and Luxembourg, it's €100,000, and the rest of the EU, it's 35,000. So if you've got loads of sales, they go out from that one central hub, and you just pay VAT from where the stock is being distributed. The distance sales really does keep your costs down with just one VAT registration in place within the EU.
Excellent, thank you, Claire. Another question now for Richard, and we've had a few questions in just asking for a bit more information about export declarations or customs declarations. And this is one from Jim, who's asked, what wording would you give to, how would you work with a freight agent to who's doing a declaration on your behalf? And with that question, if you could just go into a bit more detail about how companies can find out about the processes of completing an export or customs declaration, please.
Yes, certainly. Yeah, the export declaration, your forwarder or your logistics company will be able to do that for you. But I think I listed, and I think we'll put it on our website or when Will finishes, because I did a list of what's required on the export declaration. Also, the import declaration. Obviously, the import is obviously you have to pay the VAT, so everything needs to be on there. On the export declaration, if you go on, obviously, I look at lots of things when I'm doing my Brexit workshops, and obviously with the institute we have a lot of information, and we obviously do a lot of checking out and making sure what's in. And we certainly found with the export declaration there's a very simplified way. There are documents on site you can do, and there's actually one, I believe, and again I can give this to Will, where you can do an export declaration yourself to try to see if it works. And again, I'll give you the list of what needs to go on there. But there is help out there, and we're doing a customs and declarations courses at the moment, which are granted by the government, so you can get 50% off, and that goes through the whole process. So again, yeah, I know it's a customs declaration, but it'd be certainly worth learning. And I think we're doing an actual course on it as well, where you can actually become customs declaration qualified. So again, have a look at that on the websites. But yeah, it's all there. We can help you if you're stuck. I'm sure Will can give me the information. I can send it back to Will, who can then post it. But there's a lot of information, and it is quite simple to fill out. But again, you have to have that UA number. Make sure you've applied for that. You've got that, and obviously you need to make sure you've got your commodity codes, which will play a key role. But a lot of your freight forwarders are used to doing this, and they'll help you. The only thing I would say about freight forwarding, if I had any negative with a freight forwarder, is that just be careful they don't just use the easy commodity. It's very important you check your own commodity code. It's your responsibility. Make sure you're not overpaying, and particularly if you're going to be exporting into Europe, make sure your customer is not overpaying on the other side. So again, you're going to have to go through all your commodity codes, and I know it's laborious, but it'll be a very, very good thing to do, and as a checklist for you.
Great, thank you. Sorry.
Can I just add to that, William? Sorry. Also with the EORI number, make sure that your shipper puts the EORI number in the right box. I think it's box 8 to identify you as the importer, because especially with Hmrc, the only way they will kind of identify import VAT and let you refund it, whether it be straight away or possibly through this new postponed system, is if the EORI number is used properly within the import documents. And a lot of the time, a lot of the couriers may use their own EORI number again, kind of for ease, and it just stops a lot of import VAT actually being reclaimed. Once the EORI number is used in the right place, it triggers what's called a T79, and this is the only official document that Hmrc will allow import VAT to be refunded on.
Thanks, Claire. Thanks for that.
Great, thank you. And Richard, your part of the answer brings us on to another few questions we've had around how do you find out things like your commodity code and kind of tariff quotas and all that sort of thing. Where do you get all that information as an exporter?
Thanks, Will. Yeah, there's obviously in our workshops we tell you how to do that. There's some couple of good sites what you can look at. The Hmrc actually has been updated, so you can have a look at that. And also there's a website on the Euro one again, which we'll give to Will. It's on, I think it's on our Brexit website, where you can actually check what the tariffs are at the moment in the EU with the WTO, with that, outside the EU, what deals are getting. So again, that can give you an idea of how your commodity would work if we was just doing it from the UK. So yeah, the Hmrc that they've updated, it's very good. You put your information in there, and I'm thinking Claire will update me on this, but they've changed it. But I think you have to put the 8 and 10 digits in now. Going forward, again, it's a Hmrc requirement because they're going on to the new CDS system. Well, it's supposed to be going on it in the next year. Should have been this year, but I think it's been delayed. Hope that answers, but if there's anything more information you need, I can certainly pass that on.
Great, thank you. And it's my understanding is that with the EU Commission website, the market access database, it's still not known yet whether whether UK companies will have access to that in the event of a no deal or after the transition. Is that correct? Is that still up for grabs in the negotiations? Yeah.
Is that for me, Will?
Yeah. If you care to answer.
Sorry, Claire, waiting for you then. As far as we've got it on, people are using it. A lot of companies in the UK are using that website well at the moment to get an understanding of how it could affect them going forward if they're dealing outside. Because at the moment, obviously, you deal at the moment with all your countries outside the EU is obviously through an EU agreement. So you've got to consider that. So please build that in when you're thinking that if we get our own deal, then we have to get our own deals around the world. But we think a lot of it will be merged with the EU, what deals they have. So again, it's just keeping us. There's lots of things to think about. But I think Liam Fox is doing his grand work and getting deals done everywhere around the world. So hopefully that transition side of it will be quite straightforward. Obviously, the EU will be a bit more complex because it's completely new to us all. We're not used to doing it. I've been dealing in Europe for 25 years and never had to worry about this before. So I'm in the same boat as many businesses out there will.
Great, thank you. And we will be covering things like free trade agreements and rules of origin later on in the year, so that's definitely one to look out for. Another question we've had, a lot of the talk today has been focused around goods exports, but I know, Claire, you touched a little bit on services and software. Kind of what other aspects of exporting software or internet kind of offerings will business need to be planning for in terms of Brexit? Okay, do you want to have a go at that first?
Yeah, it's not such an impact as with goods, to be honest. As I talked about, there's a mini one-stop shop for digital services, which is supposed to make it easier for businesses. It's a bit of a pilot to see. They want to introduce it for goods in around 2021. You as the supplier, you need to understand where your customer is. You need to charge the VAT rate in the customer's location, and you need to prove that they are in that location. For example, if you are selling software virus to somebody in the Czech Republic, you need to apply the Czech VAT rate and collect information on that. You can prove that customer was there. And this is all collected, and to make it easy for the supplier, instead of now having the need to register in every country, especially with digital downloads, it would just be so expensive for a supplier, a digital service supplier, to comply in all those countries. So what they did was you have to know where the customer is, but then you can file that return through just your local VAT tax authority like Hmrc. So post-Brexit, this philosophy is in place for non-EU companies, and it's called the non-union VAT-MOS. So you won't be able to file through Hmrc. You will have to then, as I said in the presentation, you will have to choose a EU country, register there for VAT-MOS, and then you will go through the same process about identifying where your customer is, collecting the information on the VAT owed, and it then goes through. You might choose Ireland, for example. It's probably a natural kind of bedfellow in terms of language, and you would file through the Irish tax authority and pay the money to the Irish tax authority, and they would distribute it to the other tax authorities in Europe. So that would be a change, but you can't actually sign up for this until after the UK leaves the EU.
Great, thank you, Claire. And we're going to do one last question. I'm sorry to everyone who's asked a question which we've not got to, but as I say, it's been very, very busy in terms of incoming questions. This is for Richard. Just a few people have asked about AEO. Could you explain a little bit more about what AEO is, and is it a solution for smaller businesses, or is it more of a thing for freight forwarders or for bigger companies already doing exporting? Richard?
Yes, AEO has been around for a long time, particularly in Europe, and most of your logistics, and this is a question you may want to ask, most of your freight forwarders will have AEO. It's quite new, and Hmrc at the moment are pushing the AEO accreditation, and it's very similar to an ISO where it's a compliance, and it's all to do with imports coming in and exports on the duty, where if goods are coming in, like we used to have the old bonded warehouse, it'll come into your warehouse as an AEO accreditation, so you won't have to pay at ports or anything. It'll obviously you'll be able to declare it once you've released it in your facility where you are. Many companies are doing it. It's a big thing at the moment. If you're a small business, my personal thing is you can do a day's training course for a minimum amount of money to see if it works for you. And I know it's something to be honest, when I've been on courses, particularly in Scotland and other places, AEO's not been on the radar. I've talked about AEO, and it's becoming much more, people are asking a lot more questions about this, and this is why we decided to go down the route of doing particular training on it, where there is funding for it, and I think Holly does that. AEO is complex, but it's very good if you know how to use it. At the moment, I'm saying to a lot of businesses is, yes, it could be a benefit to you, but at this moment in time, it's quite a long process. It takes around about 8 to 10 weeks. You've got to do a lot of compliance within your business. There are benefits there, but at the moment, a lot of your forwarders have this facility. So it's worth speaking to your forwarders to see if you can use maybe their facility. But again, I think AEO's there. It'll be really big going forward, but I think just at this present time, it's a bit up in the air. And I think if you need questions, we've got some real expertise in Holly and people who can give that expertise to people out there.
Great, thank you, Richard. On that note, we've already slightly overrun, so I'm just going to say thank you once again to Claire and Richard for your presentations and answers. I fully appreciate the situation remains fluid, but that was a really great overview of what business can do now to prepare. So thank you both.
That's okay. Good luck, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Good luck again to everybody, and no panic, not yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Claire. So yeah, if you need more detailed information and support in preparing for Brexit, the Institute of Export and International Trade is continuing to run several training courses around Brexit and export processes in general. Among these are the post-Brexit planning workshop and Brexit health check services mentioned by Richard. You can apply for government funding for many of our customs-related courses. This funding is designed to support businesses who are or will be required to make customs declarations in the near future, something that has been a big talking point today, of course. If you're interested in learning more about VAT as well internationally, you can look at our bite-sized learning modules, which we collaborated with Claire at Simply VAT on. Links to all these services and our courses can be found at export.org.uk/training. We are currently running our 10th Open to Export Action Plan competition. This is a great chance for SMEs in the UK to win £3,000 towards their export plans. The competition is being sponsored by Bibby Financial Services, and the deadline to enter is February 8th. Information about the competition can be found on the website, and we definitely encourage SMEs to enter and complete the tool. Planning properly has never been more important, and it's a really good chance as well to win free membership with the Institute of Export and all the support for your export plans that brings. So definitely have a look at that. I've mentioned that we're looking to run a Brexit Q&A in the coming weeks, and more details about that will be sent around once we have a date set for that. So hopefully some of the questions we didn't get through today, we can get through to in that session. In terms of the other questions, we will try to do what we can offline, and also we do recommend looking at the technical helpline on the Institute of Export's website as well. As always, please do take our exit survey to let us know what you thought of today's webinar and to give us any suggestions for improvements or future topics. But for now, goodbye and good luck.